Halo Infinite has a problem, and it has to do with its heavy emphasis on military aesthetics. I believe that to make a world that is visually interesting to explore, it must have at least one of two things. Number one is variety, and number two is visual world building. Halo Infinite lacks both. But before we get into that, let's talk about exactly what I mean by variety and visual world building. Variety is really quite simple. It pertains to the amount of stuff in the game world and how different looking that stuff is from each other. This could, for example, be different biomes or interiors that are vastly different in architecture and style. Visual world building is a bit trickier. With this, I'm referring to the small details that give virtual worlds their sense of history and grounds them in the wider in-game universe. It's details and items that inform the player about the traditions, culture, technology, history, politics, and general daily life of the owners of said items. It can be expressed through art and architecture, but also through practical items such as weapons and furniture. So now that those two concepts are in place, let's get into it. I've always had a bit of a strained relationship to the in-game worlds in the Halo series, but playing through Halo Infinite exacerbated all the problems I've had with the series to an all-time high. The games are always explored through a decidedly military lens. The Master Chief is a soldier of the UNSC, and his connection to that organization is, as far as I can tell, all he has. That means that most of the characters we interact with are from this organization, while the rest are enemies from a rivaling military organization, in this case, the Banished. This creates problems when crafting interesting visual worlds, as you're placing the characters and their environments several degrees from normal society. Extra care must be taken to include items and buildings that reference base society. Without such non-military items, the organization and the people within it end up seeming completely isolated. This is exactly the problem I have with Halo Infinite. It has no art, there are no books, and I honestly can't think of a single in-game item that isn't military issue. That's a massive shame, as I then have no connection to the culture of the humans or the Banished for that matter. And it's not exactly realistic. Soldiers consume media, they spend time on stuff that isn't military related. That's been true for some of the most intense war periods in human history. Back in World War II, for example, British troops attended concerts and played sports. But playing Halo Infinite, you never get the sense that the humans or the Banished ever do anything but engage in conflict. That's a choice that the developers have made, but it's a choice that ends up hurting immersion. It creates an insular world where war is everything and culture doesn't exist. Even the architecture doesn't tell me a whole lot about the different civilizations, as all of the architecture in the game is of a practical military variety. The structures are standardized and they all have muted colors, thus contributing to the flavorless qualities all of the factions in the world exude. All of this wouldn't be too bad if the game at least had varied visuals, but again, the game stumbles. Back in 2018, when the game was first revealed, the accompanying trailer showed quite diverse environments, and it was clear that the game would have multiple biomes. Fast forward to the release in 2021 and it's a different reality. Around the release of the campaign, reports surfaced that claimed that about 2/3 of the game was cut, and it certainly seems that way as there is a complete lack of different biomes. Don't get me wrong, the environments are certainly detailed and technically accomplished. I was in awe the first time I saw the open world, but when it's all the same green, foresty, sometimes mountainous environment, you'll quickly grow tired of it. It'll fade into the background and it'll just kind of be there. The interiors, however, are a whole lot worse. They look identical and have an almost criminally low amount of assets. When you've experienced one interior belonging to the Banished, you've experienced them all. They're grey, uncharacteristic, divorced from any culture the Banished may have, and they're all bathed in the same red light. Same for the humans, but swap out the red light with white light. And same for the Forerunners, but this time the light is blue. The result of all this is that the game doesn't encourage the player to think about the different factions, what their homeworlds might be like, what kind of daily life they're fighting for. Combine this with the lack of variety and you end up with an open world game where there's no visual reason to explore the world. It doesn't entertain me through variety, and it's divorced from bigger in-universe concepts. It's a sandbox in a vacuum, divorced from the playground and the city the playground is in. That's not to say that it's all bad, however. One upside of the military angle is that you do get a sense of the technological capabilities of the different factions, as military and technology are inextricably linked. That's to say that the different types of weapons all have their unique identities, showcasing what technology each civilization focuses on. But that's the only link to the wider universe that I can find throughout Infinite's world. The choice to not allude to the wider universe is exactly that, a choice. And it's not that there's nothing to refer to. Halo is a massive IP with many books, and I'd say that pretty much every previous game in the series does a better job at both variety and visual world building. Ironically, the biggest Halo campaign to date is also the one with the least variety and visual world building. Making any creative product requires a prioritization of resources, and 343 has clearly prioritized resources towards making a fun play space, rather than making a world rich in visual world building and variety. And that's okay, but as you might guess based on the videos I've made so far, I deeply care about virtual worlds and world building. So, the world of Halo Infinite might not be my exact cup of tea, but I didn't want this video to just be negative. The world might be lacking in some respects, but you can't deny that it facilitates some very fun gameplay. There's a physicality to most objects, creating dynamic situations and at times chaos. There's also a lovely amount of verticality to the world, and coupled with a grappling hook and no fall damage, you can quickly create some fun situations. That's Halo Infinite. It's a world made for gameplay and only gameplay. A lot of people will be fine with that, but I can't help but think about the potential the Halo universe has if 343 broadened their scope and incorporated a larger focus on variety and visual world building. If you're new here, welcome. I make videos about virtual worlds, and if you want more in that vein, consider subscribing to the channel. It's free and it really helps me out a lot. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree with me? Am I being too tough on the game? If you have any thoughts, consider sharing them in the comments. See you next time.